with Lost Lane for some reason.
Thank you, and you're happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
That's
Thank you very much. That's really your statement. Thank you.
I believe that this proposed development would have a massively damaging visual impact upon Vale and all the famed views across it, not just that from Western Beacon. I argue that such a development should only be permitted if it can be demonstrated that there is an overwhelming need for it and that no better alternative solution exists. I first came to the Vale in 1947 and been resident here for most of my life. I once walked the Vale escarpments with my granddad and nowadays walk them with my grandchildren. I feel passionately that the Vale has a beauty of its own, irrespective of its proximity to the A1P. I believe that that beauty is worthy of protection and that it should be accessible to future generations. To those who know it, the Vale is special, even if it doesn't enjoy special designation. And as I see it, this issue is about the Vale. It certainly deserves better custodianship than it has recently received, at least as far as Gloucestershire County Council is concerned. Anyone who has walked its edges will know it is an undulating riverine plain, surrounded by rolling hills and escarpments, with the River Severn snaking up its centre. Nowhere will you find it angular or harsh, yet the proposed incinerator design is just that, geometric, brutish, and of a scale that is completely out of proportion with its surroundings. I did hear the UBB architect explain at one of their presentations that he had tried to reflect the pattern of the field outlines make within the Vale. And indeed, when viewed from above, they do form an angular grid-like pattern. Grids were then quite the rage in contemporary art, so I can understand his approach. And I accept that it does mean that this proposal will probably look really great from the settlement. But from the ground, or even the escarpments, no, it would appear totally incongruous. It could never sit comfortably in that particular landscape, and its sheer mass would ensure that it would not only be the view from Haresfield Beacon that would be affected, it would dwarf Gloucester Cathedral and would stand out when seen from Froster Hill, Camlong Down, Ewlibury, May Hill, from wherever folk go for the views, even as far as the Malverns. It would have an adverse impact upon the whole of the Berkeley and Severn Vale. I do accept that need can sometimes override concerns such as the preservation of the character of a particular landscape. After all, this site was first developed in 1939 and commissioned that November as RAF Haresfield. But I understand that events just then probably did satisfy the criterion of overwhelming need. Today, the proponents of this scheme within the County Council are arguing that the harm that this proposal will do to the landscape is justified by our need for an incinerator. But is this reasonable? What is this need? We do need to move away from landfill, but incineration is not the only alternative. South Gloucestershire, as part of the West of England Waste Partnership, which we could have joined, use a system which would, compared to this incinerator, firstly be very much cheaper, both to set up and to operate. Secondly, allow efficient second chance recycling. Thirdly, be accommodated within a structure that would not breach the current 15.7 height restriction, so be relatively easily concealed within the Vale. Fourthly, it would be modular and therefore flexible and able to adapt to technological advances. Number 5, it would produce energy in a form that can actually be efficiently utilised. 6, it would operate without emitting toxic nanoparticles in our atmosphere in anything like the quantity that would be produced by this mass burn incinerator, and without the problem of disposing of huge quantities of highly toxic flue ash. 7th, it would only require a 10-year contract. Actually, I've got that wrong. I've checked it since it's a 9-year contract, to be viable as opposed to a minimum 25-year commitment for this incinerator. If an alternative is available with so many advantages, why do we need an incinerator? What single advantage does this incinerator have that make it a desirable option? What benefit would it confer that justifies such damage to the landscape and the huge extra cost to the county's ratepayers? Why is it better than the South Gloucestershire option? I've asked this so many times I've lost count, but I've never once had a direct answer. I always hear that someone else has said that incinerators are a great idea, but never get the reason why. There was a witness earlier who knew 3 people, I think, who thought it was a great idea, but no reason why. I've attended as much of this inquiry as I've been able to, in the hope of an answer to this question, but I still haven't got one. Now, at that time, Johnny Ball was endorsing this scheme in the promotional material that was being put out. And he has taken an active interest in the waste debate and supported incineration in the area where he's resident, where they wish to be rid of an offensive landfill site. So I wrote to him. I received a very prompt and full reply. It's broadly in favour of incineration, but includes this caveat. I quote verbatim. Now, I do not have the details of the proposed EFW plant, the one proposed for Gloucester. But just as with Avonmouth, surely it will reclaim and recycle all metals, hard and heavy plastics and bottles prior to incineration. If this is not the plan, then it falls short of European requirements anyway, and you would be right to oppose it. Well, that did seem clear, and Mr. Ball had cut to the chase. This incinerator is old technology. It will simply put the black bags into the burner and hope to recover material from the bottom ash. It will have scant control over what goes into the fire, will certainly burn recyclates, and will not even attempt to recover strategic materials such as rare earth metals. It is obsolete today, and with better options immediately available, I believe that it would be unconscionable for this county to commit to it for the next quarter of a century. Now, regarding Mr. Ball's letter, any of you who've seen it, it should be noted that most of the figures he quotes, particularly regarding the Avonmouth plant, are wildly inaccurate. Now, strangely, they are the same as those that Mr. Waddington had been using in a lot of his statements. In June 2012, New Earth Solutions, who run the Avonmouth plant, wrote to Mr. Waddington requesting that he stop spreading such inaccurate information and issue a retraction when practicable. He did neither. I would still love to know where he got this, quote, information from, and who gave similar figures to Mr. Ball. I have also been asked, as I have a clinical background, to say something about health risks. I haven't heard all of the previous evidence, but I did catch one cross-examination which seemed to conclude with the agreement that incinerators were safe, and there only existed the perception of risk as a problem requiring attention. I have to take issue with this. Technically, one can never prove that such a system is safe. No accumulated number of instances of harm not being suffered will prove safety, whereas it only takes a single instance of harm being suffered to prove danger. I've seen all sides of this conundrum. I've tried to fight vaccine hysteria and many times lost that argument, even though all the solid evidence favoured the vaccine. Once I spent hours in laboratories and handled asbestos with complete abandon. I mean, we knew it was alert and totally safe. Drugs that I used on a daily basis, believing them to be safe on the available evidence, suddenly proved dangerous and were abruptly withdrawn In the case of this incinerator, we do know that the intention is to site it upwind of the principal population centres in the county. And we know that its stack emissions will contain nanoparticles that are highly toxic. We know there is no way to monitor or control the very smallest particles, the ones most likely to cause long-term problems. We also know that the effects of such exposure might only appear after a very long interval. There do exist defined acceptable limits within which such facilities are currently allowed to function. But this is a necessary pragmatic approach. We do not actually know with certainty what constitutes safe practice in the long term. The evidence is simply not available, and might not be so for another 50 years or more. Right now, UBB cannot prove that such an incinerator will not cause harm, and its opponents cannot prove that it will. I do not believe that in this situation we can write off the concerns of those who are alarmed by the risk. In time, they might still be proved to be correct. That being the case, we do have to ask why this county council is so determined to commission a facility that will expose its population to such emissions when a cheaper alternative exists which will achieve similar landfill diversion, but with added advantages that do include a vastly lower exposure to such potentially damaging emissions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I've just got one. Do I not get out enough?
I only learned that he's a TV presenter.
Oh, he is.
He's in his 70s, and his specialty has been science programmes.
So he pulls
I
down.
understand.
You just went through the round with them when you were young, so.
And my wife watches there's a dance competition each autumn, and he was a contestant in that.